Imagine being told that resolving a massive, really complex legal dispute won't cost you the standard $60,000 you were just quoted.
Right, which is already a terrifying number.
Oh, absolutely. But instead, it's going to cost you 20 bucks and like maybe a weekend of your time.
It sounds completely ridiculous.
It does. It's not some hypothetical scenario cooked up for a sci-fi movie, though. It is exactly what recently happened to entrepreneur and author Daniel Priestley.
Yeah, that story is wild.
And it's actually the perfect entry point into what we are exploring today. We are tearing into a fascinating and frankly kind of terrifying interview Priestley recently gave on the YouTube series, The Diary of a CEO.
It's a dense one for sure.
It really is. So the mission for this deep dive is to navigate his massive predictions about the AI economy.
Which covers a lot of ground.
A ton of ground. We are going to explore the mechanics behind why he believes plumbers are about to out-earn lawyers, unpack his highly specific warning about a catastrophic financial crash coming in exactly 5 years, and critically, how you can position yourself to actually thrive in a world overflowing with what he calls AI slop.
That's a great term, AI slop.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this because we are going on a really wild ride today, from humanoid robots doing backflips all the way to the realization that the most valuable thing you will ever leave behind might just be like a random voice note.
Yeah, it's an incredibly wide spectrum to cover. But, the anchor for all of Priestley's predictions is a fundamental structural shift in how society prices human labor.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, for decades, the economic model basically told us the pinnacle of value creation was sitting at a desk, looking at a screen, and processing information.
Right, the classic knowledge worker.
Exactly. You manipulate text, you analyze data, you write contracts. Meanwhile, working with your hands in the physical world, being a plumber, an electrician, a bricklayer, was culturally and economically devalued.
Which brings us back to that $60,000 legal problem. Because Priestley's team, they didn't pay the law firm.
No, it didn't.
They took a $20 a month subscription to the AI model Quad, and it didn't just passively write a document.
Right, it was much more interactive.
Yeah, it actively generated decision trees, provided negotiation coaching, and outlined exactly what to say to the opposing side. I mean, they resolved the entire issue for the cost of a couple of coffees.
And that right there is the inversion of value happening in real time. I mean, AI is effectively commoditizing the cognitive processing power of the human brain.
Wow. Yeah, that's a heavy way to put it.
But it's true. If a machine can regurgitate complex case law, write code, or, diagnose diseases instantly and for pennies, the premium on that white-collar knowledge work just collapses.
So the people sitting at desks are suddenly the vulnerable ones.
Exactly. Suddenly, the roles that require navigating highly unpredictable, messy physical spaces are becoming the new elite. A plumber isn't just applying knowledge. They are applying physical dexterity, spatial awareness, and real-time adaptability inside a unique environment.
Like a flooded basement with weird wiring.
Exactly. An AI language model cannot reach through the screen and fix a leaky pipe.
Wait, hold on, though. I get that a chatbot can't fix a pipe, but what about the robotic side of this?
The physical hardware.
Yeah. I mean, Priestley himself mentioned seeing videos of those Boston Dynamics robots doing literal backflips in factories. If a robot has the physical dexterity to do a perfect backflip, why wouldn't a massive corporation just buy a fleet of humanoid robots instead of paying a premium to human tradespeople?
Well, that is the ultimate convergence, and Priestley acknowledges it as a terrifying long-term reality. And it's because of something called networked learning.
Networked learning.
Yeah. Think about it. If one human bricklayer learns a new technique, they have to physically teach it to another human. It's slow.
Right. It takes months or years.
But if one robot on a factory floor in Boston learns how to perfectly lay a brick, every single robot on that global network learns the exact same skill instantaneously. The intelligence scales infinitely.
Oh, wow. So why isn't the blue-collar premium already dead then?
Because of the friction of the physical world. Software scales at the speed of light. You can distribute a new AI model to 1 billion smartphones overnight.
Just push an update.
Right. But rolling out 1 billion physical robots requires mining lithium, manufacturing motors, building factories, shipping heavy units across oceans, and, constantly maintaining physical joints and batteries.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It is. The immediate near-term economic reality is that physical scaling is just incredibly slow. Therefore, for the foreseeable future, the market is going to heavily reward human, physical, uncommoditized trades.
Okay, so if the physical trades are the same haven right now, let's look at the other side of the equation. Someone has to be paying for all this cognitive processing power we're using, right?
You would think so.
If Claude is practically giving away elite legal reasoning for 20 bucks a month, how is the AI industry actually making money?
They aren't.
Wait, really? They aren't making money?
No, and that leads directly to Priestley's bear case for AI. While the technology itself is paradigm shifting, the financial mechanics driving the current rollout are incredibly precarious.
Yeah, he lays out a staggering number in the interview. He says we're currently spending roughly $650 billion on AI infrastructure.
Massive data centers packed with specialized GPUs.
Right. And to put that into perspective, Priestley notes it's the financial equivalent of giving every single person in America a free iPhone Pro and AirPods.
That is a brilliant analogy.
But the math on the consumer side is totally disconnected. He points out that only about 5% of people are actually willing to pay that $20 a month subscription. So how does an industry survive when the infrastructure costs hundreds of billions, but hardly anyone is paying for the product?
It doesn't, at least not in its current form. Historically speaking, if we connect this to the bigger picture, whenever humanity attempts a massive technological leap, we follow a very specific pattern.
Like what?
Well, whether it was the build-out of the global railway networks in the 1800s, the electrification grid, the highway systems, or even the massive laying of fiber optic cables during the dot-com boom.
Okay.
Every single time we spend more than about 3% of global GDP on an infrastructure build-out, it briefly bankrupts the economy for a decade. The capital expenditure always outpaces the immediate consumer demand.
But there's a massive structural difference between laying train tracks and building data centers, isn't there?
How so?
Well, when the railway companies went bankrupt, the steel tracks were still physically bolted to the ground. They lasted for a century. So eventually, someone figured out how to run a profitable train on them.
Right, the hard asset remained.
Exactly. I love the analogy we can use here. These massive AI data centers are not like train tracks. They are more like giant Walmart-sized disposable cameras.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Because the GPUs inside them are running incredibly hot, they degrade, they get superseded by faster chips, and they essentially expire and must be completely replaced every 3 to 4 years.
Which fundamentally changes the economic recovery model. You are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on physical infrastructure that has a 3-year shelf life with no viable immediate financial model to pay back the initial investment before the hardware becomes obsolete.
Which brings us to his big prediction. Priestley is looking at this math and forecasting a massive financial meltdown in 2029.
Which, by the way, is exactly 100 years after the Great Depression.
Yeah, the timing is eerie. But how does a tech industry bubble become a broader financial crisis that affects, the listener?
It comes down to how this infrastructure is actually being funded. Because tech companies need astronomical amounts of cash to build these data centers quickly, they're issuing high-yield debt.
Okay.
And that debt is being packaged up as private credit. Now, who buys high-yield private credit? Pension funds.
Oh.
Yeah. Pension funds have obligations to pay retirees, so they're constantly hunting for reliable, high-yield returns. They're buying up the debt that finances these data centers.
So if the data center can't generate enough revenue from those $20 subscriptions to service its debt, the developer defaults.
The GPUs expire, the collateral is worthless, and the pension funds take the hit.
Wow.
Precisely. It's a classic Bettel dynamic, where the risk is transferred from the tech developers to the broader financial system. However, history also demonstrates that while the financial vehicles might crash and wipe out early investors, the technology itself survives the burst and permanently alters the business landscape.
Okay, so if the financial bubble bursts but the AI capabilities remain, what happens to the software industry itself? You would assume that if tech gets cheaper, people spend less money on it.
It seems logical.
But Priestley introduces a totally counterintuitive economic principle here, the Jevons paradox.
Yes, the Jevons paradox. It was first observed in the 19th century with coal. When steam engines became more efficient, people naturally assumed coal consumption would drop because you needed less coal to do the same amount of work.
Makes sense.
But the exact opposite happened. Because it was now cheaper to run an engine, people found thousands of new, previously unprofitable ways to use them, and coal consumption just skyrocketed. Making a technology cheaper and more efficient actually massively increases its overall consumption.
And we are seeing this exact paradox play out with software right now. Priestley shared a story about applicant tracking system software, or ATS. He used to spend tens of thousands of dollars a year buying this specialized HR software for his company.
A huge expense.
Yeah. But recently, using AI coding assistants, his team just built their own bespoke, superior ATS in a single week.
That completely shatters the traditional software as a service, or SaaS, business model. Historically, it took millions of dollars in venture capital, a team of 50 developers, and a massive marketing push to acquire 10,000 customers just to break even. The barrier to entry was high. Now, that barrier is effectively zero. It takes a few people, an AI, and a week.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If anyone with a laptop can build enterprise-grade software in a week, doesn't the entire software industry basically drop to a value of zero overnight?
It's a very real danger.
It sounds like a total red ocean race to the bottom where millions of kids in Mumbai can just clone your business tomorrow. If you're listening to this and you work in SaaS, is Priestley saying your job is dead?
He's saying the job of selling just code is dead. The standalone software model is entirely commoditized. But the Jevons paradox tells us the industry won't disappear. It will fracture into millions of hyper-niche micro-businesses.
Like SaaS.
Exactly. Because the software itself is cheap to produce, the real value shifts entirely to the ecosystem you wrap around it. You won't see 3 massive HR software monopolies. You'll see thousands of 5 to 10-person micro-SaaS companies.
So how do those small companies actually compete and make money if the code is identical?
By selling things the AI cannot clone. A micro-SaaS company won't just sell an applicant tracking system. They will sell a specialized ATS that is deeply integrated with, say, an annual ski retreat in the Alps, exclusive monthly dinner parties for HR professionals, an intense community boot camp, and an industry podcast.
Oh, I see.
The customer isn't buying the code anymore. They're buying the community, the access, and the proprietary methodology.
The software just becomes the invisible plumbing that facilitates the human experience.
Perfectly said.
Which ties perfectly into how we consume media and content now. Priestley argues that we are witnessing the death of social media, platforms where you actually connect with your real-life friends, and the birth of algorithmic media.
A huge distinction.
Right. This is where algorithms violently feed you content based purely on what holds your psychological interest for an extra millisecond, regardless of who created it.
And this shift has created an astronomical oversupply of content. I mean, an AI agent can churn out thousands of optimized posts, articles, and videos every single minute. When the supply of content becomes infinite, human attention becomes the only finite and therefore valuable resource left.
Priestley uses a brilliant analogy to explain how hard it is to capture that attention now. He calls it the airport fog.
Oh, that's a good one.
Imagine your personal brand or your business is an airplane. If your plane is already up in the sky, meaning you've spent the last 10 years building an audience, establishing trust, and creating a community, you can just keep flying above the weather.
You're safe.
Exactly. But if you are on the runway trying to take off today, the fog of infinite AI-generated slop is so thick it completely eliminates the signal-to-noise ratio. The algorithm won't let you get off the ground because you are drowning in a sea of perfectly optimized artificial noise.
So the critical question for anyone trying to build a business or a career right now is, how do you pierce that fog? What is the one signal that can cut through infinite artificial noise?
And the answer?
The lived experience. The irreplaceably human.
Yeah. And to explain why this works on us so deeply, Priestley actually brings up biology.
He does. He references the famous mid-20th century rhesus monkey experiments.
Oh, those are heartbreaking but fascinating.
Yeah. Researchers took infant monkeys and placed them in a cage with 2 artificial surrogate mothers. One mother was made of cold, shagged wire mesh, but had a bottle attached to it that dispensed milk.
Right.
The other mother was made of soft, comforting terry cloth, but provided absolutely no food. Now, the researchers assumed the monkeys would cling to the wire mother for sustenance.
Because they need food to survive.
Exactly. Instead, the monkeys overwhelmingly clung to the cloth mother, only reaching over to the wire mother when they were literally starving, before immediately returning to the soft cloth.
Oh.
It proved that mammals have a fundamental hardwired biological need for warmth, connection, and comfort that supersedes even the basic need for food.
If that biological need for genuine connection isn't met, we suffer.
Yeah.
We crave the real thing. And you see this playing out in the attention economy today.
Oh, absolutely.
There is an amazing story from the source material about Matt Pitcher, a financial planner. He didn't break through the algorithmic fog by posting generic AI-generated tips on how to balance a budget or invest in index funds.
Right, and AI can generate a million of those articles a second.
Exactly. Instead, he got 500,000 views on a TED Talk by sharing his lived experience of sitting face-to-face in the living rooms of 100 different people the week after they won the lottery.
An AI has access to all the financial data in human history, but an AI has never sat on a worn-out couch across from someone whose life just changed forever. It cannot read the anxiety in their eyes or feel the tension in the room.
Yeah.
AI can summarize a textbook on human biology, but it cannot tell you what menopause actually feels like. It cannot get down on one knee, feeling the rush of nervous adrenaline, and propose to someone it loves. It has infinite processing power, but absolutely zero lived experience.
Relatable beats impressive. That is such a vital takeaway for the listener. You have to discover your personal playbooks, your triumphs, your disasters, the things only you have seen, felt, and survived. That lived experience is the one moat an algorithm cannot cross.
It's the only thing we have left that is truly unique.
So if we zoom out from the tech industry and individual branding for a second, how does this massive technological disruption collide with the broader economy and the government?
This is where things get really complex.
Yeah. And we need to be careful here because Priestley has some highly critical views on government intervention. We are not taking a side on the politics or endorsing his viewpoints. Our goal is simply to impartially unpack his perspective as presented in the source material because his economic thesis is central to his predictions about where opportunity is moving.
Understood. Well, Priestley's core argument is that massive government spending acts as a severe market distortion. He notes that government spending in the UK is currently hovering around 45 to 50% of the economy.
Which is massive.
Right. From his perspective, when a central authority controls that much capital, it removes the natural price signals that tell everyday people where economic opportunity actually lies.
The prime example he cites to illustrate this is the student loan system. He argues the government essentially created a financial apparatus that pushed an entire generation of young people to take on £50,000 in debt for university degrees. He actually specifically jokes about people getting degrees in the mating habits of butterflies with absolutely no job prospects attached to those degrees.
The natural market didn't need that knowledge, but the government subsidized it anyway.
Exactly.
This raises an important question, though. Because the market signal was distorted, society stopped training people for the physical skills that were actually in demand. So you end up with a massive structural imbalance. University graduates drowning in debt and working in coffee shops, while a severe shortage of bricklayers means tradespeople can easily charge £300 a day.
Priestley views this top-down government organization, which he basically labels as a socialist trap, as stifling the bottom-up, rapid entrepreneurial adaptation that a society desperately needs to survive the AI age.
And points to the massive net outflow of millionaires from the UK as proof.
Right. Fleeing for places like the US or Dubai. He uses that as evidence that high taxes and what he calls anti-growth policies are destroying economic mobility. But if we follow his logic, I have a pushback question for you.
Go for it.
If AI is going to systematically make massive swaths of white-collar jobs obsolete, and eventually robotics will do the same to blue-collar jobs, doesn't something like universal basic income or UBI become a mathematical necessity? Even tech leaders like Sam Altman are running massive studies on it.
It's a very logical leap, and Priestley actually concedes that mathematically UBI might stack up. AI is wildly deflationary. It drives the cost of producing intelligence, software, and eventually physical goods down towards zero. But he points to the findings of Sam Altman's own open research study on UBI to explain why he opposes it. The study showed that when people received a guaranteed basic income, they didn't use the freed up time to upskill, write novels, or start innovative businesses as many hoped.
What did they do?
They largely reduced their working hours, spent more time on leisure, and began dropping out of the workforce. Priestley argues that humans fundamentally need a meaningful struggle. We need to feel we are actively contributing, overcoming friction, and solving problems. Without that struggle, we lose our purpose.
So what does this all mean for you right now if you're listening to this and feeling a bit of vertigo from the sheer scale of these changes?
Yeah.
What is the actionable takeaway? Priestley says the answer is adopting the entrepreneurial mindset.
And we really need to clarify what he means by that, because it doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow, secure venture capital, and try to build a billion-dollar tech company.
No, definitely not.
The entrepreneurial mindset simply means learning to view friction and problems as opportunities. validating your ideas quickly and cheaply, and remaining incredibly adaptable.
It's about being wide, not narrow. The industrial age trained us to be hyper-specialized cogs in a machine. You learned one skill and repeated it for 40 years.
But in an AI-driven world, innovation comes from connecting completely unrelated dots.
Exactly. Priestley points out that Steve Jobs revolutionized the personal computer, not by studying more complex code, but because he took a random college class on calligraphy.
Which directly led to the beautiful typography on the first Mac.
Right. Or look at the non-stick frying pan. It wasn't invented by a culinary expert. It was invented by a fisherman who just wanted a material that would stop his fishing tackle from getting tangled in the water. The future belongs to people who have a wide array of experiences to draw from.
To cultivate that ability to connect the dots, Priestley advocates a very specific, almost countercultural strategy. He calls it pause, reflect, document.
You literally have to force yourself to disconnect. You go out into nature without your phone, you sit on a bench with a physical pen and a piece of paper, and you just let yourself be bored.
It sounds so simple, but it's incredibly hard today.
It is. You have to allow your brain the silent space required to process your life.
Because if you constantly reach for your phone to consume algorithmic fog, or if you immediately outsource your thinking to an AI to save 30 seconds of typing, you are paying a massive cognitive tax. You lose your own deep understanding. Writing is a proxy for thinking. If you don't write, you don't think deeply.
And as we reached the end of the source material, Priestley shared something profoundly personal that completely shifted the tone of his predictions.
It was a very powerful moment.
Yeah. He is an incredibly successful guy, but his journey wasn't a clean, linear graph pointing up and to the right. He described it as a brutal cycle of boom and bust, earning millions, losing it all, and having to start over from zero, over and over again.
He learned that the tightrope is only 6 inches off the ground.
Exactly. The tightrope you think you're walking as an entrepreneur, it's low, you can fall off, you can fail completely, and you will survive.
But the real emotional core of his philosophy came from a recent family tragedy. A loved one of his suffered a severe stroke. It shattered this illusion that we all carry around with us, the illusion that we have an endless timeline, that there will always be a happy ending waiting for us decades down the road, and that we have all the time in the world to optimize our careers.
He realized in that moment that your true legacy isn't the billion-dollar AI company you built. It isn't the software you coded or the financial assets you leave behind. Your legacy is your family formation. It's the relationships you fostered.
Yeah.
He talked about how this loved one used to leave him these simple, mundane voice notes. They were just checking in, and they would always use the phrase, "It's not lost on me," as in, it's not lost on me how hard you're working right now. And Priestley realized that those random, crackly voice notes left on a friend's phone are actually the most treasured, irreplaceable things you leave behind when you're gone.
It is a profound grounding mechanism. In our rush to optimize our workflows, to compete with artificial intelligence, to build the biggest micro-SaaS business, we completely forget that the whole game, the only thing that actually matters at the end of the day is human relationships.
Yeah.
We're all just moving through time together on this rock.
What an incredible journey to unpack today. We started with the very real fear of humanoid robots doing perfect backflips and the looming threat of a 2029 data center financial crash.
She covered a lot.
We did. We've explored the mechanics of why the blue-collar worker might become the new economic elite, how the Jevons paradox will completely fracture the software industry into millions of tiny community-driven businesses, and how the sheer power of human vulnerability is your ultimate armor against a fog of AI-generated noise.
Everything we've discussed ultimately points back to one truth. The premium is on the irreplaceably human.
So, in a world where intelligence is becoming cheap, infinite, and entirely artificial... Wait, actually, scratch that. Let me rephrase. In a world where intelligence is basically becoming a free commodity, what is the one deeply human lived experience you possess that no algorithm could ever replicate? Maybe it's time you grabbed a pen, found a quiet bench in nature, and wrote it down.
I love that.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.